people always love these sort of stories. Snoop Dogg and Scott Storch, and they told me this and I ignored it, and that's how I became successful doing me. Like, a lot of times people you still hear them, but there are stories where Snoop Dogg and Scott Storch or somebody gave me a piece of advice and I was able to run with that, and now I have $10 million.
It changed my life. Sure. Facts. I want to run something by y'all. I saw this, but this was a clip from T-Pain where he was talking about some of the things that he's done that had he listened to other people, things might not have gone the same.
Stop asking artists for his advice. If I would have listened to Scott Storch, Snoop, Bone Crusher, or the many artists that came before me, if I would have listened to them people, I would not be where I am today. I swear. Scott Storch told me to not use the 808s that I use still to this day. And that's the same 808s I used on Kanye's 808s and Heartbreaks, which made a monumental album, which made, like, the reason he said that he even did that album was because of the 808s I used when Scott Storch told me not to use them. Snoop Dogg told me that auto-tune shit was a gimmick, and it was only gonna last for like...
He sharpening a pencil?
I had to be sharpening a pencil.
Do what you like, bro.
Open and wine.
That's my advice. Stop asking people for advice and do what you like.
What y'all think about that? Because I've been in that situation. I'm sure you all have all been in that situation. Just might be a different, conversation or a different topic. But Lone, I know you've been in that situation a lot in terms of sharing, like sharing creative works and stuff. Is he on to something here? Because you can listen. You don't have to listen. Because clearly they missed on all three of those that he used.
I mean, you can't really refute anything he just said.
You can't.
808s and Heartbreaks was huge.
True.
Even the auto-tune stuff that he was doing, that wasn't like, people were clowning on that heavy at the time. From one angle, it's like, yeah, sure, you can listen to people's critiques and everything and take everything into account, but who's to say that, he got advice from some other stuff and the advice wasn't good, It just so happens that these two particular instances just happen to be, monumental and changing. But I'm guessing there's a lot of people out there as well that don't take any advice from anybody, but are still been making music in their bedroom for the last 25 years. You know what I mean? So
that's a good point.
I think there's a balance in it. I think you do have to have confidence in yourself, but I think if you want to have confidence in yourself, you better execute it to the fullest.
Yeah.
At the same time, you better really believe in the things if you're going to go completely left field. You know what I mean? So
gotta wear it.
Yeah, I guess that's just what I would say. I don't know.
I think a lot of it too has to do with the two names that he just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So he's saying that Snoop told him that the auto-tune was a gimmick, and it was a gimmick for certain artists. T-Pain was just able to do it very well. Because if you think about it, when T-Pain started doing it, everybody started doing it.
True.
He's the one that lasted and did it the best, essentially. 808s and Heartbreaks, I mean, we seen what that did. And he's talking about creatives telling you what to do, too. Right. So that's a little different.
Right.
For example, like say somebody actually liked what you were doing as a creative and kind of told you not to do it so that they could do it.
Yeah.
We've seen that happen.
I mean, both of these artists that he just mentioned both used 808s and auto-tune.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of sexual seduction.
Yeah. He did it after T-Pain blew up.
Yeah, he did after that. But I mean, there was a lot of people. I mean, Death of Auto-Tune, Jay-Z had that. I think the problem was it was oversaturated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he even talks about how Jay-Z doing that, and then Usher mentioning it about him using the auto-tune kind of hurt his feelings and things of that nature. But
yeah.
I mean, as an artist, if you're passionate about what you do, you just got to do it. But I think everybody has people in their circle that can give them constructive criticism that actually means something and holds weight.
Yeah.
Because just because you like something, you might be listening to it with a different ear or not considering people's taste. And it might not be it. And some people take that and run with it, and it actually helps them. So it kind of goes both ways, because you don't want to deal with yes men all the time.
That's the thing.
But you also don't want to be complacent and not take any kind of advice when it comes to your art.
Yeah, I
like that.
I think that's a good point. To follow up what I said originally, I think as a creative in general, no matter what field you're in, you have to be able to, like, if you have other creatives around you that you trust their opinion, you want to at least to be able to accept their input Now, whether or not you choose to embark on whatever they say, I think is kind of up to you, but I think it is important to be able to at least accept input from specific types of people, and then you can take it from there. I find this, this is a challenge sometimes for me as an educator when I have students and stuff, where I want to be able to share my experiences and show the best practices for some ways that the students are trying to do things. But at the same time, I don't want to overly influence them in a way that's going to make them do something that is exactly the way I would do it.
Or hinder their creativity.
Yeah, I want them to still be creative. And I think there's a challenge. I think there's just as much of a challenge in giving out advice as there is in knowing how to manage to taking the advice in. I think those are both equally important things, but I don't know if I fully 100% believe exactly what T-Pain says, but
the way he's laying it out.
But realistically, I guess I kind of do, because that's exactly how I operate. Like I'll take input from people, but at the same time, like if I don't truly believe that that's what I want to do, then I just won't do it. I'll just continually stick with mine. I just kind of use it as a reference point to be like, okay, this is what this person says. All right, cool. If I hear like 9 other people say this, then maybe it's something, which is kind of what he said, but he did it anyways, and it just kind of worked out because he believed in himself, So
I'm a firm believer in the source. I take into consideration the source because I look at creatives differently than I do, if you want to call it the consumer, but I also value both opinions because you make music for the consumer. So you have to always listen to both, but it still comes down to, like Lone said, you have to wear it and just pull the trigger at some point, no matter what you've heard or who it came from. Even if it's your ride or die people, at some point you're going to have to say, I'm putting this out as is based off how I feel, and just got to live with the results. And I think that's what T-Pain is speaking to, is like, he heard it's like hearing from Snoop, that's big. Like, for somebody of Snoop's stature to say that, you got to at least take it into consideration. But that does not mean that you don't have to go for it. And it worked out for him that he actually
because
made his own
think about
choice.
it. T-Pain was essentially a new age Nate Dogg. Everybody was featuring T-Pain on everything. You almost had to go to T-Pain to get a hit for a while.
Mm-hmm. He was on everybody's hook.
He was on everybody's hook. He was on everybody's song. He had something to do with it. He found something that worked for him, and not to mention, T-Pain can actually still sing without the auto-tune, and he's a good musician. So he knew the formula, and it worked to his advantage. He wasn't just an artist going in the studio like, hey, put the effect on my voice, and I'm just going to say what I usually say. He was actually an artist doing it, and it worked in his favor. So, I don't know.
I'm curious if they made these comments while he was already doing it.
Or if it was prior to where he was in his career in terms of these conversations.
Yeah, because at a certain point, like if T-Pain is seeing that, no, this is actually working really well.
Yeah.
Like why,
Because sometimes, you think, Jay?
Sometimes people see something stylistically they wouldn't do and try to put that on you. Mm-hmm. I remember Eddie Murphy told a story about his early career, and then he asked, Rodney Dangerfield just happened.
I remember this story.
And he was like, so what'd you think? Him being a young comic and Rodney Dangerfield being the man. And he's like, I don't know, kid. Like, the cursing and the race stuff, it's kind of a bit much. Yeah. And then he winds up being on Saturday Night Live doing Delirious. Then 48 Hours hits, and then Beverly Hills Cops hit. And then he sees Rodney Dangerfield like in a bathroom, and the first thing Rodney says to him is like, "Hey kid, who knew?" Like sometimes you got to understand things that you wouldn't do stylistically. Yeah. That's my really bad Rodney Dangerfield.
No, that wasn't too bad though. That about a C minus.
I'll take it. I'll take
about
it.
A C minus.
And so like sometimes people get caught up in the things that they would do and how they created and are maintaining their success, and they want to give that to you. That's not your journey, and stylistically and what people will tolerate and enjoy, sometimes it changes. And so I think that's what happened, when people, at the time it probably seemed like, okay, these guys are really trying to help me out. It's not coming from a bad place. That's
exactly what I was about to say. Like, it's definitely coming from a place of them trying to guide him so he doesn't flake himself off. You know? So
coming from a good place.
I same thing. I remember, Kanye told a story about how he asked a producer for some advice, and they're like, turn those drums down and stop using all those samples. And it was like, this is, and this
that's
is
another who knew.
Yeah. It's sometimes you get into a situation where, yes, those people were looking out for you in their own way, but like you have to walk your own path as a creative. You know, there are things that maybe, you know, someone, if Combat Jack, you know, God bless the dead, if he'd ever heard our show,
yeah,
and he'd have been like, oh, well, you could change this and change that, and he would probably given us good advice. And the thing is, we've this show has evolved for the people who've been with the I don't even say us from day one, really y'all from day one, because like I said, I showed up a little bit later.
Yeah.
You know, there are things like we used to talk about everything we had going on locally, and it was like, no, because the majority of the people who listen to us aren't here in the city of Indianapolis.
And then there was just the like not speaking outside of just the straight lane of hip hop.
Yeah.
And we started to expand that part and open up certain things.
Yeah. You know, so there are changes, there are things you can do to evolve your style, but you know, a lot of times people will listen to someone's advice just because they're already successful. Sometimes the best advice you could get from somebody is someone who, you know, just has your best interest at heart, you know, not so much because they're already successful. Because like, once again, a lot of times people think, okay, this is the path that I made to make it. Yeah. You know, so I want you to come on and be as successful as me, but at the same time, I can't do what you do. You know, we can't do what the Joe Budden podcast is doing. We can't do what Math Hoffa is doing. Yeah. You know, do they have more numbers, more eyes? But also, those are people who are somewhat famous compared to us.
A lot more connections.
You know, but also, we're not an industry. Like, we haven't made an attempt to try to be an industry podcast. So there are some people who consider that to be a mistake. The fact that we don't interview more artists or engage with artists. Like, you know, some people with the whole Lupe fiasco thing where he talked about Ja Rule, where like maybe someone else would have been like, hey, let's get not Ja Rule, but
get Lupe
on the show. And it's like, I don't know if we really want to talk to Lupe like that, you know, unless he wants to come on and talk about what we want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we've had what's the producer, Bink?
Was it Bink? Yeah,
Bink was in our DMs, you know,
upset,
you know, like, so I mean, to your point, to bring it back around, like I think you have to have a strong sense of, you know, a strong sense of self and a strong sense of, you know, understanding, but you just have to, it's not a black and white thing. You know, it's like being able to accept input coming in, being able to discern it, being able to, you know, analyze it, and then being able to run it by your people and see, you know, if it makes sense and make your decision and then go and adapt.
But also, people always love these sort of stories. Snoop Dogg and Scott Storch, and they told me this and I ignored it, and that's how I became successful doing me. Like, a lot of times people you still hear them, but there are stories where Snoop Dogg and Scott Storch or somebody gave me a piece of advice and I was able to run with that, and now I have $10 million.
It changed my life. Sure. Facts. Yeah. So it does go that way as well.
You know, so it's both. It's both ends.
That's what I mean.
Like, I actually gonna bring that up too, because he could have left out the parts or gems that they dropped that actually worked in his favor. Yeah. But I mean, that makes for a good story down the line.
And the way
to say that they told me not to do it and I still did it anyway. So,
and I think with T-Pain, I don't know T-Pain, but his personality, it doesn't even seem like he was necessarily just mad about it. He's just giving everybody an example of how conversations go and how you have a choice to go certain directions. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And like, it didn't come from a bad place from what I saw.
Yeah. So and down to his point was do what you like, right? Yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, you should do what you like, do what you feel. I think the key is, like, if you're going to do you, just make sure that you are doing you and you're actually 100% in it. Don't like dip your toe in it, man. Don't just like get a little bit. You gotta jump in the water, man. Gotta jump all the way in.
I went to a music conference in Phoenix a long time ago, and Ninth Wonder was one of the panelists, and he was out in the vestibule, if you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. He was talking to just a bunch of producers, and he was like, so many people laughed and told him Fruity Loops was not about to be successful. It's the same thing. Who knew? Because people were telling me about Fruity Loops. I was like, yeah, they said this person uses it and that person uses it. And I was like, nah, but old boy from North Carolina really uses it. I didn't know too much then. I was still getting, familiar with them, but I was like, nah, he really be using it. Yeah. And it worked.
Yeah, that's with everything. Just like with DJing. Yeah. There was DJs that shunned Serato. Mm-hmm. Until you had to use Serato. Mm-hmm. They start seeing what you were able to do with Serato and was like, well, I guess I got to go ahead and bow out and stop carrying these crates and just plug on my laptop because it just makes sense.
That's a good one.
I saw somebody DJ scratching using tape reels.
I seen that.
Oh, for real?
I think Jazzy Jeff
was reacting to it.
That.
Yeah. He was like literally scratching on tape. I was like, it's when it all comes down to, you just have to have confidence in yourself and you have to believe in the things that you're doing. I think that's the key thing here is you have to believe in what you're doing if you're going to do it,
Right.
And, believe in yourself or lean on advice. So.
No, that's a good one, Terry,
But-
for the DJ part. That's
But it can absolutely backfire on you, and it can absolutely do the opposite. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
What Jigsaw say? Make your choice.
I think, when you're talking about artists, I think one of the things, maybe artistically, you shouldn't take as much advice from people and walk your own path and really try to decipher what they're trying to tell you in the time that you're creating. But artists, start taking advice from people on business and
That's
not selling your publishing and having a lawyer that isn't, a part of the record company already. Like that's the
reading
kind of,
your contract.
That's the kind of advice I feel like, okay, if we're really going to pass down game, pass down that stuff that's going to keep you from being in that jerk contract and you not knowing that you can renegotiate every album.
True.
These are the things that, this type of advice, especially from you see somebody who's already gone through it, take that advice. The creative advice, walk your own path. But the business advice, walk the path of the person who's actually getting paid and has figured out how to do what we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. Yeah. But I just think that needs to be said because we keep seeing people not make the same artistic mistakes over and over, but the same business mistakes over and over.